off of it. I got about another 25 miles to go, I think. I'm really cooking along pretty good. I got the wind at my back. I got the tide at my back. Here we go. Goat fights. I don't know what's going on with those goats, man, but the one with the horns has turned into a real prick. And it's really aggressive with the smaller one. I don't know if they're finally becoming of age and one's getting heat or something, and I don't know what's going on, but something's up. Now we got another little baby goat coming. And I think we just had 30 eggs in the incubator for chickens, selling a bunch, and 24 of them went smooth. And then during that process, because you got all these baby chicks in this incubator going bonkers in the house, and every cat in the house and animals gazing at it, like the big cat knocked the lid off of it. And I guess it's supposed to be a certain temperature in there and humidity. And what Sarah, who grew up on a farm, and her brother's an aviary, has a massive, huge live bird collection, I'll call it. He's got everything, emus, chickens, peacocks, you name it. And I guess what happens is the membrane in the egg, it'll be dry, it'll be stuck to them, and they'll just start to get cracked out of the shell, but it's too hard, it's too dry, they can't do it, and then they die. So we watched 2 die, and then it gets to the point where it's like, all right, they need a hand if possibly going to make it. I think we had 4 that we busted out, and I made a video of it. I put it on the other YouTube channel. It was pretty bizarre to watch. And one's a little giblet. It's got his eyeballs almost out of his skull, but there's still skin around it. You know, eyelids, I guess. And his beak's a little off cut. And everybody's going, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. And I'm like, he's going to make it. So we chipped all the little babies out of those 4 eggs, put them back in the incubator. We just took off the whole day, and sure enough, they're all bouncing around. They're going to make it. So it'll be interesting to see what old Squint's going to be like. We might nickname him Squint. Hey, quit it. Quit chewing on that. What else? That's about it. And I got a whole bunch of voices to be heard. Obviously, I'm busier than hell. Lots of boat shuffling and moving to do. Had to leave Barkley Sound in a storm the other day, and then the water flattened out nicely. Obviously coming back, stopped off steelhead fish on the way there, and now we got to drive for 3 3/4 hours, probably tomorrow, and then I'm gonna have to get up early in the morning, and I'm gonna have to run the new boat, guide boat, from Victoria up the west coast to Barkley Sound, solo. I think I'll be doing that day after tomorrow. See how it goes. That's all my immediate goop. Now onward. Getting things shared. There's lots to share, lots I could talk about, but I probably won't shut up. So, let's get into hearing people talk, alright? Other than me. Everybody gets a turn. There's a lot of people silently waiting. A lot. Hundreds, thousands probably. Hundreds. There's just hundreds and hundreds. Let's get into this. Hello, Steve. Sorry if I missed any punctuation or wrong spelling. I'm a meat cutter, not a writer. LOL. And I'm a meat killer, not a word reader. Whatever. That probably wasn't even funny. Alright. I know you're not much on pictures. Honestly, I feel the same. Most are you had to be there or a dark blotch that could be anything. I'm sending you a few that were taken on my Android during a 2-day mini getaway for my wife and I. We visited a national park with a well-known cave system. Getting right to it, short and simple, we both saw a large black being stand and start walking on 2 legs while on a short hike. We didn't discover the pictures till later that day. And besides, the being we saw walking between trees, the same thing my wife glimpsed before she started for the truck, we had no idea what was all around us. The end of this short trail had a deep, small valley with a cave opening. Some interesting Civil War history to add to the really cool and very beautiful piece of woods, due to the old growth trees and lack of logging. I should add this trail we were on was a deck just up off the ground. Sorry, let me do that one more time. I got things distracting me. I gotta get settled in here. I should add this trail. This trail we were on was a deck just up off the ground and 5 to 6 feet wide. Very nice for the wife, not having to worry about ticks. Not my normal trail, but it was nice and easy. Where the deck / trail came to an end, I had noticed a black spot on the opposite hill across a small valley that at first I thought was another small cave opening, or maybe a stump. Almost immediately, this stump / cave opening started to move, as in getting up and walking on 2 legs through the trees to the tree it's standing beside in the picture. In all, maybe 50 yards, I saw it move. I had learned from the previous day to steady my phone as best I could to get any clear pictures. So I had my phone rested on the deck rail above the cave opening and took a section of the pictures, not knowing if I got anything. And while this is happening, my wife said we need to leave, and we started to leave now. The sound of her voice let me know she was as serious as a heart attack, and I better do exactly what she wanted. I could hear the fear in her voice. 12 years of marriage spent together, you know when there's a joke, or you better listen. She glimpsed the same thing and instantly started for the truck. This at best is 200 yards back in the woods on a deck, made trail. Very nice for the kids, so I thought, but a place had never thought I would see one of these people. I have more to send you, but unlike this sighting, my next encounter was terrifying for me. It was a life-changing event and is still a very emotional thing for me to think about, much less trying to write it out or vocally tell. But I will do it and get it to you. If it doesn't help someone, it'll help me get it out. Please don't use my name. We've had enough ridicule from the few who we trusted to tell, and her job would be too open-minded to it. Actually, well, you do. I'm sure by now you have some idea how much true help you are giving the members of the club in no return. I'll attach pictures, and please share them. Tell me what you see. Stop sharing with listeners. This is for you personally. All right? Gotcha. Give me a minute, I can read this right now. All right. There's almost the exact same amount of email left over just for me, from the people who just sent that. And so, my message to the person who emailed this in, first off, thanks for that, obviously. Thanks for sending it to everybody here. And whatever you want to share with me next, go ahead and share all you got, all right? Share the whole 9 yards, especially if it's going to help you out. And yeah, you're right about the pictures. I'm not a big fan of photographs myself, but that, I guess I've accepted the fact too that doesn't make it for me to decide what all you guys don't get to watch, right? I'd be a bit of an asshole to do that, right? So I'll share these here with you guys, take from where you will, leave it. And the man who emailed this in to us has promised to go take some pictures of himself at the same distance from the same spot. They did a few things. They put some GoPros hidden on them, facing backwards and all sorts of other stuff, and they went back to this place more times. So anyway, yeah. Send me all you got if you want. If you want to share more, if it helps you especially, then keep sharing it, all right? But more importantly, though, would definitely look forward to seeing pictures of you in the exact same places where you sent these photos from. And another thing too, a message to everybody out there, I honestly do not understand myself. I'm not being a dick, I'm just saying this with absolute innocence, honesty, is I don't understand why people so commonly take a photo, can't you see it's right there, blah, 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 but they never put somebody where the subject was for reference. Like probably what, 9 times out of 10, people don't do it. I don't get it. Same with video clips. Even the people who are the most popular in the video and Sasquatch video and photo department, they don't do it. Why? Right? Anybody who has ever taken any kind of photograph of these things or other things they want to share with the world, it should almost be as mandatory as pressing the button on the camera is you getting somebody to go stand at the exact same spot where the being was and where you took the picture from. It's funny, that almost reminds me of hunting because I, as a rule, pound it into people. Whoever pulled the trigger, wherever you pulled the trigger from, you make sure you mark that spot always, and you mark that spot where the game animal was standing. It's very important, obviously for different reasons, but it just kind of reminded me of that little rule that I always pound into people. But anyways, I'll be looking forward to hearing more from you, man, especially those additional photos that you're going to share with everybody through me, okay? Now, let's get on with more. What do you got here? This is titled, it's from our friends in Australia, in, I don't know what's the worst place to be right now, Canada or Australia, for having all of your freedoms, most of your freedoms being systematically taken away. So whoever is in Australia watching this channel right now, I send you my best wishes and encouragement to fight like mother effers to correct the wrongs going on down there and here. Anyways, get back on track. Let's listen to this. This is titled, Yowie Encounter and More from Australia. Hi Steve, my name's Tony from Australia. I don't mind if you mention anything from this email. I'd like people to know these things exist, and like the Sasquatch, the Yowies are real. This email is really to try to get my head straight and tell someone that won't take the piss out of me. Take the piss out of me. An Australian, that's rousing the shit out of you. Firstly, apologies for the length of this email. So much to say, and I really need to tell someone about this, and a huge thank you for what you're doing. No problem. We can't do this without you, alright? So let her rip. At the time, I was living on the Central Coast, New South Wales, Australia. I just wanted to give you this small encounter, not nearly as dramatic as some you must hear, but I feel all encounters should be shared to make people aware of what's out there. And I did send a report to an Australian Yowie group, but I guess it didn't have the wow factor for YouTube clicks, so I was given the cold shoulder. I don't care if people think I'm nuts. I'll tell the story to whoever wants to hear it. But after my first 2 attempts, I don't think I will tell anyone again. But what people take away from it is up to them. You have no idea how frustrated and pissed off I am after sharing my story with a suppositively expert group of Yowie researchers. And one of my closest friends. After sharing with them, I feel like an idiot. And actually, the friendship with my mate has never been the same. Well, no doubt, right? How do you be friends with anyone who doesn't have your back or questions your sanity? It's like, see you later, like the old rule number 1. You have time for people who fan your flames, not piss on your fire. Right? It's sad but true. And it's that statement alone, when I first heard it, made me take a look around me, and I got to business of eliminating those who piss on my flames. It's a good one, but this is the right place for you to share, all right? And I don't want you to quit sharing. I don't want you to quit telling the story, okay? Don't let them win. That's letting people win. Now, from the beginning, as mentioned, I was in the Central Coast, NSW, Australia, and had an encounter in one of our state forests, Strickland State Forest. I grew up in the bush hunting and spending every second I could shooting rabbits, foxes, kangaroos, feral cats, etc. So I know what sounds these animals make. My encounters was with my son and my wife. Went for a bushwalk one morning a while ago, July 2020. Not a lot of people out as it was early and a bit cold. The ground here is mostly dry leaves and sticks, and being quiet is impossible unless you're on the dirt trail. As we're heading down a trail behind me to my left, I heard what sounded like someone pacing us in the bush, which both myself and my wife noticed, and given the terrain, a person would need to be nuts walking in that area, and you simply couldn't walk that fast in there if you could walk at all without sliding ass over head down the embankment. It was bipedal, no doubt, and the steps were long and heavy. Its steps were like one of its steps were like one of its to 2 of ours, which was made me take notice. No doubt. I wouldn't say I was scared, but I was concerned. I've heard that one before from my grandfather. It was some hobo living out there that was looking for trouble. We stopped, and the steps stopped. It then went quiet for about another 5 of our steps. Then it seemed to have crossed the track behind us with a large bound, and I heard it land heavily with 2 faster steps to follow like it was hurdling some obstacle. And now was our right, and now was on our right, again pacing us. I kind of knew where it was at all times, so I was trying to slow down and let my family get a little ahead, so if there was an incident, and I was the target. They stopped a little down the trail to wait for me. I knew it stopped when I did and roughly where it was, so I just started taking photos with my phone all around the direction I thought he was without looking directly at it. Not knowing what I may have captured, if anything, until later when I got home and uploaded the day's photos and, lucky enough, caught what I can make out of something peeking over a fallen tree exactly where I felt it was. It's not the best photo, but you can clearly see its brown woolly head, bridge of his nose, and one black/brown shiny eye. It didn't look the typical patty type. It resembled more of an Ewok, for want of a better term. So I went back to Strickland the next weekend with my wife to see if the whatever was peeking over the log was something that looks like what I photographed. I expected to see a branch trunk, bark, anything that would explain the thing in my photo, but it was no longer there. So I went up to where it was, and there is a large rock with the log you see laying on top. From standing behind, I could not be seen by my wife. Holding my cap up at full arm's length, she still couldn't see it. I had to hold my cap on a stick probably a good 3 to 4 feet in the air above my head until she could see it from the location where I originally took the photo. That's pretty big. I climbed the rock to a point where I could peek over the log to see my wife, and I would have been at least 3 feet off the ground. I'm just under 6 feet tall, so whatever this was would have to be at least 9 feet tall, if not more. The palm fronds up there were all flattened where something had been standing there a lot, and this location where it was peeking from would only be 20 feet or so from the public walk trail. But to get to it, you either have to hack your way through palms or walk along the cliff edge to get there. Not something the average person would ever consider doing. And all the dry palm fronds are as slippery as hell. And Strickland Forest is a pretty sketchy place to walk off the trails at the best of times. I've been on all the walking trails throughout this forest many times and know this area really well. In frustration, I found a contact for a group of caretakers for the forest. Basically a group of volunteers that maintain the tracks of BBQ areas and so on. Telling them not all the story, but just bits to see if they would come back to me with questions on what I saw. Didn't get an answer for over a month or more. Then one day received a phone call from out of the blue from some government department asking me what had happened and who else saw it. He seemed genuine and almost like he knew of other cases. His line of questions we too spot on for just an inquisitive person taking a report. When I told him I had photos of what I believed was watching me, he almost lost his shit. And asked if I had sent them to anyone else, and would I send them to him? No problem, I said. All I want is to be put in contact with the local Darkinjung Aboriginal people. I'm sure they know all about this creature. He was happy to oblige, but surprise, surprise, I was never contacted. Now screw him, don't need him. And this is where it gets strange. And this part only happened to me 3 weeks ago. I've been listening to many of your stories and I keep thinking about the mind speak, so I went back out there by myself, back to that location, started saying in my head, I know you're here, where are you? I just want to know I'm not going crazy. And of course nothing but complete silence. There's a large rock outcrop which overlooks a valley and you can see way deep into the park. I was just there sitting, thinking, you bastards are probably watching me right now. Scoping the bush, I kept focusing on this one part way down the valley. Can't explain why, but when I looked, there was almost the feeling I couldn't look away. When I did, I was immediately drawn back there. Now, I don't know if it was my imagination or what, but I kept thinking something was saying, we like it here. We are safe here. I'm thinking this is BS, I'm going home. So I started walking back down the track to the car park. If you've ever been driving your car and you get to where you're going and you can't remember the driving there, then this is what happened. The next thing I remember, I'm sitting on a log in an area I really don't recognize at first, but eventually clicked as to where I was. I was actually about 5 kilometers away at the other end of the forest, and I don't remember getting there. I was exhausted, confused, and felt like I was going crazy. Looking at my step meter on my phone, and sure enough, it shows I was walking for almost 2 hours, stopping along the way, veering off the trail into the bush, and then continuing on. Steve, I don't know what I did for those 2 hours, or how I walked those bush trails without breaking my neck. And this is some pretty rugged tracks, waterfalls, muddy, slippery rocks, etc. I have to say I'm more confused over this topic now than I ever was, and I have no one to talk about this, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'll attach the photos. Feel free to share. I've tagged the photos with what you're looking at. Thank God for you, mate, and your channel, Tony. Okay, Tony. There's only one photo here, and I will share this in the video. Obviously, I'll share this, but I'm going to have to I'm gonna have to do a search on your email and see if I can't find it and see if there's any other photos missing. All right. Because what I'm looking at right now is just one photo and there's no description with it, and I'm looking at some dark things with a red circle around it. Obviously if I blow them up, I can't make out what that was because I wasn't there, and there's also not another photo of the same photo with you standing there, okay? So, if I'm screwing up right now and I did not save the rest of the photos, I apologize, and if you can, email them back in, okay? And even better if you can, again, like I said earlier, don't ever quit. Don't quit because of what people say and do, all right? That's how they win, that's how you lose. I'm sure everybody's probably said that a million times growing up, all different topics, but it's true. The only way you win is by not quitting. And I was going to mention something like that a little while back on another topic. You know, like as an example, it's just it's a bit of a side note, but it's somewhat similar to what we're talking about here. When Canada had this huge protest going down in Ottawa, our military friend contact basically told me straight up that the people didn't at the time have a clue how many police officers Canada was losing at that time, and as well at that time, other times you always hear about people who are at an organization or people who are in government, and they make a protest by quitting. I cannot be associated with these people. I don't like what they're doing here. I'm leaving. Well, sadly, that action of not speaking up and not staying and not writing it, that's the worst thing you can do. Okay, is quitting. Because the people who are in the same association as you, or the same trade, or the same business, same police department, whatever, if there's some bad pickles there and you quit and leave, what the fuck does that do? That ensures the bad guys rule, right? And then there's the other hard-ass part of me, my brain, that will also possibly go to the other point of, well, I guess you're the wrong person to be there anyways because you're a pussy. Right? You're too emotionally weak to stand up and fight and make sure the right side of the coin wins. So there's always that way of looking at it too, right? If you got it, and so I'm not directing this at our Australian friend who just wrote in. I'm just saying this is another topic that I was hoping to bring up another time, was to explain to people, you know, if you are anywhere and you're surrounded by corruptness, whether it be your bosses or coworkers or whatever, and you think it's wrong, so in protest you quit, that does absolutely nothing. That's almost as bad as what the bad people are doing by being corrupt and lying and thieving and misleading people, etc. So we can't shut our mouths. We can't walk away. We can't shut our mouths ever. It doesn't matter what the topic is. You can't do it. All right? Those positions need to be filled by people who are willing to stand up and fight those dirty, filthy pricks and replace them, not let them win. So, but sorry for going off on a little tangent, but getting back to our original email, our friend from Australia, do not ever let anyone make you feel that I'm not sharing this ever again. Screw that, dude. Don't do that ever. Don't do that ever. You come here and you share it, and you're going to come here, you're going to find like-minded, very intelligent people here. There's a shit pile of very, very confident, kind, hardworking, intelligent, kick-ass people are on this channel. If you haven't realized that yet, it doesn't take too much time to figure that out. It's very good. This is a very, very good place here. And the good people here outnumber the bad probably by 99.999 to 0.00001. All right? How's that for my Tony Robbins motivational speech? All right, moving along. Let's get to some more voices that need to be heard. Make sure they're heard loud and clear. All right? Here we go. All right, so this next one, I may have read this to myself first possibly, or maybe I shared it previously. I'm not sure. So again, if I shared it before, oh well, you're still getting your money's worth for the ticket you spent to get in here, all right? Damn goats. Okay, listen to this. This is called Steelheader and Believer. Hello, Steve. You can just call me Bug Nuts. My steelheading buddies always do, thanks to my preference for fly fishing. Where I go after steelies in Washington is pretty remote. The fish are almost all wild, and to say I usually fish alone is an understatement. Same with me. In my 4 decades of solo hikes and wades, I've had a bunch of weird experiences, 2 of which I absolutely consider encounters. I'll try to keep my story short. The first happened in 2011 on a river near Mount St. Helens, which I know has a storied past as far as sightings. I hiked up a logging road about 1.5 miles from my truck, intent on wading and fishing my way back downstream to what we call the honey hole. I caught and released a nice steelhead up high, so I was that much more excited to get there. I hooked a big bright hen at the top of the hole that went ballistic with runs and leaps, but I was able to land her and get a great pick before release. As I checked my hook and readied my gear to continue working through this stretch, a big rock came flying from behind me and bounced around on the freestone boulders between my spot and a stand of 10-foot high willows about 50 feet away. I froze and peered into the shadows, listening for any sound and watching for any movement. I knew I had the river entirely to myself, as it was a weekday, and I hadn't seen any trucks or people on my way in. It was eerily quiet, with no leaves rustling and no birds chirping. I felt strongly that I was being watched, as my heart began to race and the hair on my neck stood up. After a few minutes of observation, I decided to get back to my fishing, even though the feeling of being watched had not left me. I settled down and got my focus back to the task of finding another steelhead, even as my head was spinning with what the F's. About 10 minutes later, as I had reached the midpoint of the ripple, another big rock was thrown from behind the willows, this time crashing into the knee-deep water near where I had been standing only minutes before. The best description I can give of the sound of that splash would be like a shot put dropped from a high dive. I freaked out. First, I shot a glance back toward the willows, and when I didn't see anything, I quickly secured my gear and started moving downstream. On sheer adrenaline, I waded across the river at a spot I normally wouldn't even try normally, but it was the fastest way back to the logging road. After climbing a steep bank on the other side, I literally ran the whole way back to my truck, in my waders, boots and all. After tossing my rods and pack in the bed of the truck, I jumped in, started her up, and locked the doors. Thoroughly out of breath and sweating, but feeling safe. I then replayed the whole experience in my mind. I remember my conclusions at the time. Number 1, No man could have thrown that rock that far. Number two, something or somebody didn't want me there. And even though it or he cost me a couple hours of steelheading time, I was fine with that. And three, the primal fear we have felt is real, but in a sense, irrational given the circumstances. If it had wanted to hurt me, it easily could have. The second story is shorter, but possibly more disturbing. One morning in the spring of 2013, I was hiking solo down a trail in the area of Wynoochee Canyon called Grisdale. In the old days, I used to be able to drive my truck way down this trail to a creek where I'd park, gear up, and then wade the rest of the way to some sweet steelhead water on the Wynoochee River. Most recently, though, the timber company that owns the lease on this land gated it. At the intersection with the forest road I drove in on and began clear-cutting large swaths of evergreens in that area. The long hike in was short and shadowy this early morning, and I was moving along at a pretty quick pace since I'd been tracking the river flow stats and figured the nooch would be in perfect steelhead green shape. But halfway down the trail, past the clear cuts and into the old growth, the sound of three hard, distinct wood-to-wood knocks stopped me in my tracks. Here we go. The knocks were methodically slow and rhythmic, and it sounded as if they came from just ahead of me and a few hundred feet off the left side of the trail. It was deafeningly silent for the knocks, and I squinted in low light, scanning the woods ahead of me in an effort to see any movement. Every muscle in my body tensed up, and all my hairs stood on end for the next few minutes as I started to think about my options. The prevailing thought was to say, screw it, and continue on down the river because I was jazzed to fish this day, and I'd already done all that work to make it this far. Rather than just hiking along quietly, however, I decided to announce my presence by making some spastic, random yells and sounds of my own. Right before I made it to the creek, some 15 minutes later, I once again heard loud knocks of wood. Only this time, there were only two, and they came from slightly behind me and on the opposite side of the trail. Holy shit, I thought, there's either something following me or there's more than one. I felt safer once I made it to the clearing of a huge gravel bar along the river, and I commenced hunting some native steelhead, all the while feeling like I was being watched, tracked, or both. I must have sounded like a complete spaz for the next few hours as I waited, fished, and yelped my way to my favorite riffle. I found a couple of aggressive winter steelies that morning, but the thought of the hike up and through the shadows was looming the whole time. No doubt. Fortunately, the brisk walk back was uneventful, and boy was I glad to see my truck when I reached that point of the trail. The really fascinating part came when I struck up a conversation with a lady bartender at a roadside tavern I stopped at to calm my nerves on the drive out of the valley. I mentioned to her that I had an interesting experience on the Grisdale Woods that morning while hiking in to fish. And instead of scoffing at my story, the lady leaned toward me and said, "Oh, you gotta hear this." She proceeded to tell me the tale told by a group of loggers that began making daily tracks into those same woods when the harvesting began a few years earlier. As these lumberjacks would sip their end of the day whiskey and chug their beers, they told her of frequent sightings of not just a Sasquatch, but a whole family of Sasquatches. According to her, they would talk openly about this group of hairy beings, some short and precocious, and a couple very tall and beastly. They would be seen walking the cut line almost every morning, as if it was their daily routine, and that these beings didn't seem all that bothered by the comings and goings of the other logging trucks. When asked her opinion of why this wouldn't be reported or no pictures or a video had ever surfaced, she spoke of a code amongst the loggers that they observed in order to keep the government's eyes out so they could do their jobs without interference. Unbelievable. As for me, I've had plenty of friends and family with whom I've chosen to share these stories ask me why in the hell I'd go out there in the wild alone, and in particular, why I wouldn't be carrying a gun. My simple answers have always been that it keeps me young, I'm 56, and that I'm a minimalist steelheader and don't want to carry too much gear. As to the first part, the truth is that being out there at the mercy of whatever I may come across is exhilarating and does make me feel young again. And as to the second part, the truth is, I don't think I've had the heart to shoot one of these things unless I was truly being attacked, which frankly doesn't seem that likely to me. Keep up the good work, Steve, and I trust my contact info will remain confidential with you. Of course it will, man. Gotcha. Thanks for that share. And that's going to be pretty unnerving, man, because I don't think there's too many steelheaders up here in the West Coast that don't think about these beings, right? Unless, you know, obviously I've heard too much about them, but I will share you guys something that happened to me a few days ago. I had to go out to the coast to grab my other boat, and I stopped in one of my favorite steelhead holes there, and got really lucky, good timing. There's a bunch of fish in that hole. I hooked 6 or 7 of them, and unfortunately I had one fish that I brought up, probably about an 8-pound fish, and I got him up, and he was bleeding out of his gills. And it's very unfortunate. We can't keep wild steelhead here in British Columbia. And it's catch and release only in single barbless hooks. And of course I had a single barbless hook, but it just caught him. He gulped that sucker down, and that hook had pulled lodged into his gills, and that's your lungs. So it's just like humans or any game animal. You put a hole in your lungs, and without any medical treatment, obviously if you're a human being, whatever, you get a hole in the lungs of anything, they're dead. They're eventually going to die. So when you are a steelheader and you love the fish, you don't want them to die, and you see that, it's kind of like, oh shit, that sucks. But anyways, I let the fish go. You know, even if they're going to die, they come up dead. By law, you can't keep them. So here goes this steelhead, it swims off, and then I go back to fishing. And probably about 15 minutes later, and just like you say, you know, you're all by yourself, and it's dark, kind of gloomy around this spot where I'm fishing. You got to hike into it, and behind me is a wall of thick willow, and across me is the steep bank and the dark timber. But you know, when you got that thick wall of willow behind you, you always feel a little bit vulnerable in a way, and especially since to get back, you got to go upriver, cross the river, climb up the bank, go through the forest to get out. You're vulnerable. So it's down to fishing away, and all of a sudden here, and because in the back of my mind, especially me, I'm always aware of every single sound I hear as I'm fishing, what's going down, right? And I heard a kersplush out of the corner of my downriver, on my side of the river, about 40 yards down, maybe 50, and just starting to go around the corner, and the leaves aren't fully bloomed yet, so you can just see through the willow this huge splash on my side of the river, 50 yards down, this pissing rain. And obviously instantly it's like a pucker moment, oh, you know, because I remember the instant thought I had was, I'm not alone. What is it? And you're hoping you're not going to see a hairy leg, right? Bear, whatever. But it was an eagle. It was a huge eagle, went straight down and dove and splashed, this frickin' massive splash, and he jumped up and flew away, and he missed the fish. And then, this is crazy. And I kept on fishing. And then I fished probably for another 45 minutes or so. And then I threw my camera down a bunch of times. So I was there for at least another hour and change. And then I hiked across the river, up the bank, out to the truck. And then I drove the truck downriver probably another, I don't know, half a mile, to where there's a logging road, bridge. You get, well, old logging road. You get right beside the river. And I went beside the river, there's a pool there. So I get out of the frickin' truck, grab the camera rod, and I went back into the river. Half a mile later, and probably an hour and a half, 2 hours later, I'm casting the camera down, because I want to see if there's any holding in that hole once I got home. Check the SD card. Excuse me, and I heard a kerbloop behind me. And turn around, here's the steelhead that I caught over an hour and whatever ago, half a mile up the river. And he's basically tumbling down the river, 3/4 dead, unfortunately. And I literally spun around and grabbed him with my hands. What are the chances? But anyway, you know, it's a tough one. I think I intentionally killed and ate a steelhead. The last time for me was over 20 years ago. It was a hatchery fish. I don't even kill hatchery steelhead. So it's really unfortunate, and it's a tough one, right? It's like you don't want to waste it, but anything that dies in nature isn't wasted. So I put him up on the bank in full view of the eagles. Guaranteed an eagle came down and grabbed him. And this is a pretty trying time for eagles, especially because it's in between salmon runs, a long winter scavenging, and springtime is a real tough time for any species normally that doesn't hibernate right. But how's that for a fish story? Crazy, right? But anyway, thanks for that email, and I know exactly how you felt, and I am right on the same page as you, as when we are out there in the middle of nowhere, steelhead fishing, alone, by ourselves, and we got the sound of the river around us and everything. And sometimes you just know, right? You just know you're in the zone, and you just hope that today's not the day. I always think that. I always think, I just hope today's not the day, because I know I know that I am going to have that potential face-to-face again. I know I am. The math points that way, and especially with my past experiences, what I do, what I make sure I do anyway. I know I'm due, and I know and I expect it to happen. It's just when each time I go, I would say to myself, I hope today's not the day. I'm just not into it. I just want to go fishing, or I just want to go hunting. I just want to enjoy this time. Just leave me alone. You know what I mean? So to be out there steelhead fishing and hear the boulders that you heard get tossed in the river, God, no thanks. You know, like I just had that pucker factor happen, was it 2 days ago? That eagle, I didn't see the eagle flying down. It was just a massive splash on my side of the river in this remote spot, steelhead fishing. So what you just had happen to you, I'm picturing it absolutely crystal clear. I don't envy anyone that has to have that happen, right? It's not fun, man. It's not fun. It's just not fun. Now, what do we got here? Starts off with a bunch of photos. Hi Steve, my name is Patrick McCasey. McCasey. Mick, A-S-Y. Despite my Irish heritage and the fact that it's St. Patrick's Day, I can assure you I haven't hit the sauce yet. What the hell's wrong with you? Just kidding, man. I've been listening to you for years, and I find you to be the most believable in being believable, and being an avid hunter myself, entertaining also. I'm 65 years old, grew up in a large Catholic area in St. Paul, Minnesota. I've guided a few people from St. Paul, Minnesota. We had 8 kids in the family. My folks divorced when I was about 12, and my dad dated a lady who already had children. I became best friends with my stepbrother, Tom Landwehr, who introduced me to the outdoors. He eventually ended up commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources under Governor Mark Dayton. We were both Boy Scouts and both attended all boys military academy, Cretin High School in St. Paul, Minnesota. My dad loved camping and would take us up into the Gunflint Trail out of Grand Marias Mountain a couple of times a summer. Tom and I couldn't get enough of it, so at 14 and 15, before we could drive, we'd hitchhike up there and get as far away from people as we could. We'd camp on Northern Light Lake, just about 5 miles up the trail. We fished the lake and had good success each time. It was 1973. I was a junior and Tom's a senior. We decided to take a dry riverbed up to what I think was Lake Merganser and try our luck, as we noticed it was pretty remote. I was in the front, Tom's in the back. After about 300 yards of pulling over deadfall, I looked and noticed some huge tracks crossing a sandy area in the riverbed. The creature was bipedal, and I'm guessing the tracks would be at least 18 inches long. I said, Tom, you gotta come up here and look at this. He came up and we both said, what the F? I said, who would put on big bird shoes and come way the F out here in the middle of nowhere to do this? They seriously looked like big bird footprints. The stride was about 5 feet between the tracks. They looked fresh, so I decided to see what my size 12 and 145 pounds would look like next to the track. I sunk about ½ an inch. These prints were a good 3 inches in the sand. We went through the usual big animals we knew of, and nothing made any sense. As either Tom or I said, do you smell something? I said, I sure do. It smelled very musty and stunk like a bear or a moose. One of us responded, do you feel like something's watching us? Response was, hell yeah, let's get out of here. We brought the canoe back to the lake and settled in at camp and pretended to sleep. This happened before any Bigfoot shows were aired, so we were dumbstruck. The weekend we got home, there was a show on Bigfoot, and some of the casts shown were of a 3-toed Bigfoot. We tried calling each other as we lived in separate homes, but couldn't get through. I was in Lake of the Woods getting in some walleye fishing last week with some of my other retired Creighton buddies with some success. Got a nice 29-inch. On my way back to White Bear Lake from my buddies north of Mille Lacs Lake, I was talking to my wife when I noticed something walking upright in a tree line about 200 yards to my east. It was big and dark. I told my wife I just saw a Bigfoot and turned the car around. As I stopped to take a picture of this thing, it had squatted down. I took a picture of it across the field and zoomed in after I took it. I swear I see muscle definition in the arms and the hair that looks like it's translucent. Had to share, Steve. I don't care if you use my name, but the stepbrother may not want to be outed. I sent him the pic and he said it's a bit early for bear. All the best. Keep up the great work, Patrick. All right. Well, that's nice fish. Thank you for the share, man. I don't know if I'm supposed to share the fish picture publicly or not. Now, the dark object that looks possibly like it could be something squatting down. You just heard me rattle on about people sending in pictures and they never go over there and stand to where it was. So, if you will, when you get a chance, could you possibly go to where you took the picture from, send somebody over there to that exact same spot, and we'll see if the spot's there, and if not, we'll also see how big it actually was compared to a human being, right? And that would appease the literal millions of people that are here watching this channel today, right? Thanks for sending that in, man. Man, I'm gonna have to go back and find that name that you mentioned and make sure I didn't mention it, which kind of sucks. And that's another thing too for everybody else listening. If you have any details that you don't want made public, don't email it to me, all right? And if you do, put it in the very beginning of the email so I know right away, okay? And that'll be that just makes life much more easier for me, okay? Now, what else have we got? Let's go with this one. How big is this? I gotta get going. We're gonna take Sarah out for early Mother's Day dinner tonight because I'm gonna be moving the boat. Anyway, no more babbling. Listen to this. One more and then I gotta get going, all right? It's titled Sasquatch Sighting. Hi, Steve. Here's one of a handful of stories I have of my venturing in the forest on New England. I live in central New England, where not much of an importance happens. Been here all my life and never felt while hunting, fishing, or hiking, my life was in more than usual danger. We have black bears, which normally aren't a problem, and moose that typically are docile until rutting season. Even the moose present a very minor danger. Bobcat, often seen along with the gray ghost, otherwise known as a coyote. Here, coyote are rather small, and not to be compared with others I've seen in Washington State, New England seldom presents dangers from wildlife. So all my life, venturing deep into the forest was safe, and safer still with a Winchester 94 30-30 in my hands. I believe in being prepared. What happened on September 23rd, 1998 has stuck with me like pitch on a tree. I was walking alone with my trusty 30-30 and metal detector to a spot I found while hunting public lands the year before. It was a few miles from nowhere, and being a tad poor, I had to walk the whole distance. No ATV for me. So down old logging roads and trails and across streams I went. Along a brick wall I had found a depression in the ground which once had been a cellar for an old homestead dating back to the late 1700s. While metal detecting this day, I found an old spoon and buttons that date to the site to the aforementioned time. It was a good day. For the first time in years, I found a little piece. There's nothing like deep depression to kick the crap out of you, and nothing like the woods to calm you. On my way back to my car, as I approached a stream I crossed earlier, I saw in the corner of my eye something upstream. I looked to my left, thinking what I was now looking at, what had to be a black bear. I drew closer to the water so I could get a better look at it. And that's when I realized this was no bear. I could see long arms that went supporting. I could see long arms that were bent, supporting a large upper body and head. It was crouched down, drinking from the stream, and even seemed to put its entire face in the water, shaking its head, possibly to rinse off a little. As a hunter, I've learned to challenge what I see. Before raising a rifle on a deer, I ask myself, am I certain this is a deer? Am I certain where this bullet will go if it passes through the deer? Is there anyone in or around the line of fire? This thing picked up its head, turned, and looked straight at me. Yep, not a bear. He stood up facing me. I could see it clearly was a he. He must have stood somewhere between 10 and 12 feet in height. Long arms that hung midway down by his massive thighs. He seemed a little body tall and legs short. His shoulders made Shaquille O'Neal look sick. I could see now this Sasquatch, could potentially kill a grizzly. I don't know how long we stared at each other. I was completely in awe of him, the wonder of it all. He took a step to his right and entered the tree line and disappeared. I'm not sure if I was insane, delusional, hallucinating. I stood there for several minutes, my heart beating through my chest, covered in cold sweat. I slowly walked to the spot where he was crouched down with my Winchester in my hands, after I convinced myself I wasn't crazy. There were large footprints, knee indentations, handprints in the mud. Believing it best to leave the area, I turned back and continued to walk to my car. About 30 seconds into that walk, about 10 minutes since he stepped into the tree line, I heard 3 knocks, like a large branch striking a tree trunk. It sounded maybe 200 yards away, and I interpreted it as a warning. I put some electricity in my step, jumped in my car, and never returned to those woods. I think it's about time I visit my old deer hunting / metal detecting grounds. I'll let you know if I see anything worth reporting. Keep up the good work, Aaron. And welcome to the Club of No Return, Aaron. Where, as you know as well as I do, you'll never not think about that incident ever again. Ever. And you'll never be able to leave this club, so you're stuck with us. Right? And another one, and another one, and another one, and a frickin' another one. But anyway, I got you going. Now, if any of you are curious, if you want to go on Google Earth, or go on that, your maps on your phone where it's a clear, real-time view of the map, and take a look at the coastline of Vancouver Island between Victoria, British Columbia, and Barkley Sound. And that is where I will be traveling solo, just offshore, running a boat from that point to Barkley Sound. And the amount of sightings on that shoreline is ridiculous. So I'll throw down the zoom lens for the Canon here, and I'll put that on the seat beside me in the boat, which I normally do, and the Sony Handycam, which I rarely ever leave home without ever. And as I'm motoring along solo on that journey, I'll definitely be scanning the shoreline. That should be something else if I saw something odd and got it on videotape, wouldn't it? But that strip of shoreline is very, very remote. There's only one stop I can stop at if I needed anything, and that is in Port Renfrew. And Port Renfrew is where there's 2 or 3 rivers emptying in Port Renfrew, and the head of that valley, where the San Juan River is where my grandfather had a face-to-face experience with that thing, broad daylight, in mid-July. Yes, in that same valley. The amount of sightings that have come out of Port Renfrew alone are absolutely stupid. Gordon River, just around the corner from the marina as well on the river, just everywhere. It's everywhere, it's non-stop. Anyways, that's where I'm going. So I will be video chronicling the whole journey anyway. Who knows, maybe the water will be calm enough that I can just kind of cruise along and maybe get some shares out while I'm doing it. Who knows, you never know. But either way, I'll share that video with you guys. And once I get back. All right, I gotta go. It's time. Share my story at howtohunt.com. If you want to help yourself or help somebody else, you can get your email in there, all right? And we'll get to it.